Hey everybody, Larry Lawton here. We have a great edition of interviews here today. I have a great guest. I have Raphael Rowe, who's the host of Inside the World's Toughest Prisons on Netflix from season 2 on. Some great shows I watched from Brazil to Norway, and we're going to get into that. And Raphael, I have a great story. We both were in prison for 12 years, so we're going to talk about prison, what's going on in it. Some of this stuff is going to be real good, guys, so really stick around for a great video. Without further ado, let me introduce Raphael Rowe from Inside the World's Toughest Prisons. Welcome to the show, Raphael.
Larry, thanks for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and it's good to be talking to someone who has a similar experience to me on the outside. You know, I spend a lot of time going on the inside and listening to guys' stories about why, what, for, and how. So it's nice to see somebody on the outside making a success of their life after such dark times. And hello to all of Larry's guests. I hope you enjoy what we talk about today.
Well, I think we're gonna, Raphael. You went to prison. Let's go into your story a little bit. Let's give the viewers a little recap of what happened to you, because you did 12 years on a life sentence, but you were found innocent. But can you give them a view of what you've been doing?
So when I was 20 years old, I was arrested and charged for murder in a series of aggravated robberies, which ended up in me and 2 other guys being convicted after a long trial at the #1 court here in the United Kingdom in London. I was convicted and I was sentenced to life in prison plus 54 years never to be released. So in other words, I would have died in prison had I not campaigned during the many years that I was in prison to prove that I didn't commit the crimes, because I didn't commit the crimes. I was not involved in the murder or the robberies. So after 12 long years of campaigning, we managed to get my case back to the Court of Appeal here in the UK. My convictions were overturned and I was set free. So yeah, between the age of 20 to 32, I was in the UK's top maximum security prisons. Spent a lot of time in isolation, segregation, because I didn't conform to the system. So I was anti-prison, anti-everything you can think about. So I suffered a lot psychologically and physically during those 12 years. But I'm out the other end, and I've led, since coming out of prison, a very successful career, which has culminated in me presenting and hosting Inside the World's Toughest Prisons on Netflix.
You know, let me just get back into your we got time here. I hope you have time. We're gonna get back into your time in the joint, because as 20-year-old in the United States, first of all, they have the thing called the Innocence Project. That's where they...
Yeah, I'm aware of it.
Okay, you're aware of it. How they go to prisons and they see if people are really innocent, and they call it actual innocence, and they look into their cases, because there's so much prosecutorial misconduct and a lot of stuff like that goes on in court system. We both know that. With your case, before I get into you in prison, because we're gonna tackle it all. We had a redo here, everybody, and this made it even better because I did a lot more research and really enjoy talking to Raphael. He's a real great guy. When you went to prison, and how did they? Were they after you, so to speak, or was there a reason they wanted you so bad? I mean, obviously, if you were proven innocent later down the line, something happened. People recanted testimony. How did that come about?
Well, I mean, you've got to look at what happened in terms of the perpetrators. So the victims of the crimes initially described the perpetrators, therefore the guys that were involved in the murder and robberies, there's 2 white men and 1 black man. What happened was 3 black men ended up being locked up and sentenced to life imprisonment. So from the very get-go, it was obvious that there was a very serious racist element to our wrongful convictions. You can't lock up 3 black men when the victims of the crimes at the various different scenes described the perpetrators as 2 white and 1 black. So from the very get-go, there were at minimum 2 black men in prison for a crime they didn't commit. But I wouldn't argue that I was fitted up by the police. What happened was, as the evidence emerged, and as the police, which operate very differently here in the United Kingdom to how they operate in the United States. I mean, the police are the police, but they have different powers. And the powers here are that the police carry out the investigation. And then as they discover evidence, if there is evidence that undoubtedly shows that the person that they've arrested and charged is innocent, they should present that evidence. That didn't happen in our case. For example, lots of money was paid to witnesses who gave evidence in my case, and told a pack of lies. But we didn't know at the time of the trial that these individuals had conspired with the police, for example, and that those individuals were paid lumps of money after the trial and I was convicted. We only discovered that 12 years later. So there was a lot of skullduggery going on during the investigation. For example, there was never, as there wouldn't be when you're innocent, any forensic evidence, any DNA evidence, any kind of evidence that could say, yep, they were definitely there. There was nothing like that. The only piece of evidence that existed forensically linked the only white man in my case with blue eyes to the scene of the murder, because his fingerprints were found on the car at the scene of the murder. When that evidence was discovered, you'd think that the police would come and say, sorry, Raphael and your co-defendants, we got it wrong. No, what they did is they then conspired with that witness to fabricate evidence to say that, oh, his fingerprints were on the car at the scene of the murder because he was pushing the car. So every time the evidence pointed in another direction, the police decided to change the goalpost, as we say, or change the evidence so that witnesses kind of explain that evidence. It wasn't explainable, it was ridiculous. And so when I say we were fitted in, it's not like the police came after us and then planted evidence on us and then sort of set the scene in that way. That isn't what happened. What happened was, I think they embarked on an open and honest investigation. But when they started to discover the evidence that proved we were innocent, because I was already charged, because I was already in prison, rather than accept that they got it wrong, they continued to perpetrate this miscarriage of justice. Even when I got to, and it's important to mention, even when I got 12 years down the line, Larry, and we got to the Court of Appeal and the court were quashing my conviction, even the judges then said, this is not a declaration of innocence, this is an unsafe conviction. The convictions were unsafe. I mean, you don't lock people up and then let them out and quash their convictions, compensate them, and then do that damage limitation thing where they say, oh, this is not a declaration of innocence. Well, truth and justice is not about right and wrong. It's not about innocence or guilt. The courts don't operate like that in this country. It's an adversarial system where you have a prosecution and a defense, and whoever's good at doing their job will win the day.
Well, it's kind of like that in the United States. What happens, although the law states that the prosecutors are supposed to seek justice, not vengeance, or even to get the right evidence out. That's the way it's supposed to be in the United States. Obviously, you have prosecutors that have to win at all costs. They want that record of 100 wins and 0 losses, or whatever they're going to get. And that's what happens in the United States. Your case is very similar to what happens in the United States. They don't travel down another path or come up to at new evidence and look differently. They can't be wrong. It's their egos. It's so much more into it. And I fight that, and I see so many people. I did the law for 12 years, Raphael. I was very good at the law in prison, and I won cases with people, got them what they call remanded back into prison, and I do a lot of that today. One of the best guys I've ever met is Paul Tellini, who's on this channel. Great friend of mine. He did 28 years in prison. And so your system, your case doesn't surprise me, even in the UK or wherever, because we do know there are injustices. Where there's human beings, there's injustice. I always try to tell people that.
But isn't that what's crazy, Larry? Because, you know, at the end of the day, you know, the prosecution is the prosecution, the defense is the defense, and they've got their legalities to fight. But on a human being level, you know, the morals and values of a man or a woman that stands there knowing that they're prosecuting somebody who didn't do what they're accusing them of doing, they know that, and yet their career, their pay packet means more to them than the life of an individual is about to be condemned for the rest of their life, regardless of the colour of their skin, regardless of their social background. I mean, what person can stand in a court of law, having been taught how to fight the rights and the wrongs and champion the sort of underdog? How can they dare stand there? And there's so many of them that do that. I mean, it just baffles me to think that people's morals and values can be so bad.
Well, you know, we're going to get into that here in a second, because I looked at that very hard in my life. I was strapped down naked, beaten, and pissed on by guards. I was in the hole for 3 years. I was totally beaten sometimes. It was just, it got to the point where, you know, suicide was almost an everyday thought. And I used to think, and I still to this day think, how could you do that to another human being when he's in this lowest part of his life, and then go home and say, hi, hon, I had a great day at work, or hi, honey. What kind of value system, or what kind of humanity. It boggles my mind that people can function. Although in the United States, there's a very high rate of suicide among guards because they know what goes on. They know how bad it is. They know what, and some of the good ones, sadly, I just was talking, I'm going to interview a guard that guarded me. He ended up going to prison himself. But he was a good guard. Okay. But it's going to be a great show, and I'm going there next week. And it just boggles my mind. And we'll get into that in a minute, because now I want to go to the next step with you. How did you handle that? We were both in prison for I was from 96 to 2007. When were you? 88 to
2000.
All right, so we were in actually the same time, in prison. And I knew what was going on with me. And my family's justification, my friends was, why did he get so much time? No murders, nothing of this nature. And then a child molester gets 5 years, something like that. But even besides that, I was a guilty man, Raphael. I never fought that. I'm guilty. Don't get me wrong. I needed to be corrected. I needed punishment. Obviously, we can debate what's right and wrong in punishment. How did you handle it, being an innocent man? Because I was with innocent men, and I know. I used to sit and think, okay, I'm guilty. But what if you weren't guilty? I don't know how you didn't just go crazy.
You know what? You're right, and you identify something that people need to be aware of. It's a completely different mental state when you're in prison for a crime you didn't commit. When you're guilty, you can accept to some extent that you're being punished for what you did. You've been caught, you're paying the price for the crime that you committed, whatever that is. Even if you're disputing that it wasn't as bad and you shouldn't have got so long, there's lots of those guys inside, as you know, who would argue that I should have got 5 years, not 3 years, or I should have got whatever it is. But the mental state of a person that's in prison like myself for a crime they didn't commit, we have many hurdles. Let's just start with the external. So other prisoners like yourself, Larry, prison guards, they don't believe you're innocent. And, even if they want to, they can't, because they're guilty themselves and they think, yeah, you're just trying to pull the wool over their eyes. You're just trying. So that's the first hurdle. Trying to convince other prisoners was not my mission. I didn't care whether other prisoners believed or didn't believe me. It was about how I conducted myself, and purely because of the militaristic way that I was in prison, other prisoners stood back and they thought, man, there's something different about this guy. This guy is not accepting for one moment what is happening to him. I wouldn't conform to anything. I wouldn't work in prison. I wouldn't come out of my cell to do anything that would mean that I accepted my predicament. So when they opened my cell door and they expected me to go and do what other people did, which is go to work or go to classes, I refused to do any of that. So it made my situation even worse. And then the prison guards would treat me very differently, because they've got to treat everybody as guilty. And regardless, as the years went on, their attitude towards me changed. As the publicity started to question the safety of my imprisonment, then the prisoners and the prison guards would then question my predicament. And so it made life a lot easier. But I dealt with those years in a very angry, bitter way. I was so angry, so bitter, so desperate every day to get out of prison that it made my life a misery. It made things difficult. And it was only as I got older, so when I was 5, 6, maybe 7 years into these wrongful imprisonment, and I got a bit older and I'd met lots of guys who had been in the same situation as me and had been fighting their wrongful conviction for years, and their words of wisdom made me realize that fighting with my fist, being punished, was not going to get me out of prison. I needed to understand the law. I needed to understand how journalism worked so I could get people to write and broadcast stories about my wrongful imprisonment. I needed to be more articulate so that I could explain to my lawyer rather than just shout at my lawyers that I'm innocent. I needed to manipulate the director or the governor of the prison or the prison guard so that I could get more time on the phone, or that I could get more time writing letters or extend my visits to. So I learned over the years how to cope, but never for 1 minute accepted my predicament.
It's amazing for a young guy. Remember, you went to prison at 20 years old. That's, we're still babies. I mean, we look at our age, my age, I know I'm way old, but I look at 20 years old. I went to prison at 34. I got out at 46. it's a little different. I was a little more mature. I knew the game. I was in the crime game. I was a lot of that kind of stuff. So it wasn't as a shock to me as a 20-year-old. I was in young as a kid too, but nothing like that. Not like, especially innocent and all of that kind of stuff. I was always guilty. And I laugh at that in a way because, I learned from my mistakes. I mean, obviously you didn't learn from me, but you got such an education, not only on the inside and not only outside. Obviously, anybody who's innocent in prison is going to have a rough time. And of course, now he is in the process of writing a book, and we'll make sure we let people know about that when that does get released, because it's got to be an amazing story. Because I don't care what country you're in, prison is prison is prison. And we're going to go into that right now. I think that's a great segue into what he does today. Raphael, I said before, is the host of a show called Inside the World's Toughest Prisons. And I'm a guy who was in the United States' toughest prisons. I was in USP Atlanta. I was in Edgefield. I was strapped down naked, beaten, tortured. But I watched Raphael in two shows. I watched him in a Brazilian prison, and I watched him in a Norway prison, which I'll tell you what, if I had to go to prison, that's where I'm going. But let's get to the tough prison first, Raphael. First of all, how did you get the job? How did you get this job?
Well, Netflix had already broadcast this particular show, Inside the World's Toughest Prisons, here in the United Kingdom. And then Netflix came in and bought the show. So a British production company made the show for a British television program. And then Netflix liked it and they said they wanted it. And when they took the program to put on their platform, they didn't want to use the same presenter. They wanted somebody who, not that this guy didn't in his own way, but they wanted somebody who had more authenticity, credibility, somebody who might have lived the experience. And it just so happened that I was talking to the production company at the time. So in essence, the production company and Netflix approached me and asked me if I would be interested in presenting this program. And at first my response was obviously no. I spent fucking 12 years trying to get the fuck out of prison. Why the hell would I want to go back in willingly? So it's all about negotiation. What could I offer? I'm not just going in there to sensationalize prison so people can see what prisoners are suffering and to exploit the sadness that evolves not just the prisoners but the prison guards and their families' lives. I mean, because we are taking people into a world that is quite secretive. No matter how much you think you have watched prison programs, the reality is you don't really get to see half of what really goes on. So it was important for me, Larry, that when I did this, I could be unrestrained, if you like, that I go in there as a prisoner so that the prisoners accept me, and that takes some doing, but also I'm left alone to my own devices to try and expose what really goes on. And so it was a big negotiation. It wasn't just, let's just go into prison and make a program about prisons. No, it was much more thoughtful than that, and even more so because I know, and you will know this, and anybody else who's been to prison, willingly going back into those memories is not easy, especially when you've suffered like we have.
It boggles my mind to watch you go into the Brazilian prison, which obviously, and I know your mentality. As a man who's been in those mentalities, I know you can get prison ready mentally. I forget physical. I mean, I'm a physical guy, but people ask me, wow, you're a physical guy, you're a big guy, Larry. This is what, my brain is what made me survive prison. I could read tension, I could feel, I could cut tension with a knife. I could tell by just looking at a person or the way they're looking, the way their eyes shift, whatever it is, I could tell what's going on. If there's gonna be a riot, if something's going down, you feel it. It's in your bones when you did a lot of time. I mean, it's like even to this day when I go out, I can feel it around me if something's not right. And I know you have that. So what, I mean, I don't know if and I'm being honest, I don't know if I could do that without saying, fuck this, get me the fuck out of here. You give a shit, what are you paying me? I'm not gonna go live knowing that something might jump off and I'm the target, because if it's legit and that you tell me it is, they can't save you for shit if they want, those inmates want to take you out or do something or make a point or do something to say, listen, let's get the cameraman and these people. You know as well as I, there ain't a shit nobody's gonna do about that. And I know that, and you know that. So what made you say, I mean, I can imagine, I got goosebumps, Raphael, thinking about you doing that and without saying, get the fuck out of here, or call somebody, I'm sure you can get out. How did that work? Did you have like code words, something, I mean, to get me the fuck out of here?
Of course, I mean, underlining everything is a secretive word that we will have between the team. If anybody feels threatened or in danger, you know, not just me, but anybody in the team, because something might go on, as you and I know, that no one's aware of. I mean, it's much more difficult for me because the majority of the time, the people that I go into the prisons with have never been in prisons before, so they don't have the mentality that you were talking about, the eyes at the back of the head, that the awareness to put your back up against the wall, the cuteness to know that it's not so much the people you're dealing with here, but it's the guys that are over there who are envious of the fact that they're not part of the program. They're not getting their 15 minutes of fame that could be instigating some kind of backstreet kind of vengeance, you know, that they're going to take out on us. And also, you're right, every time we walk inside one of these prisons, there is a fear factor that goes beyond any kind of possible control. We don't have security. I don't go in, and it's part of the program project, because if I go in there with guards around me, then that's pretense. So I go in there on my own. Yes, I have 2 camera people beside me trying to capture everything as it unfolds. And then there are formats where I will go and work in the kitchen to see what it's like there, or spend time with the guards. But we don't have any security. There have been situations in the prisons where we have been attacked, you know, in Paraguay, for example, and this is not caught on camera because we were attacked, but guys picked up the snooker balls and started throwing it at my team. It smashed the camera. And you're absolutely right, there was no one there to protect us. Luckily, I build up a rapport or a relationship as quickly as I possibly can with some of the prisoners so that I earn their respect. They have a responsibility then to not necessarily protect me, because they can't on their own if 10 guys or 15 guys decide that they want their 15 minutes of fame. But I build up enough respect that comes from this place, and it's very simple. I'm going to share your story to the outside world as best as I possibly can. I'm going to tell people what it's really like inside these awful conditions. You know, I want people to hear your story and see the conditions you're in, not because I feel sorry for you, not because I want them to have empathy, but I want to show them the reality of the situation, that prison is not a luxury. And even if the prison itself, the structure of the prison, like Norway, has some of the privileges that you don't get in other places, there is nothing like having your mind confined in a space like a cell. When that door shuts and there's no handle on the inside, and I suppose people in the outside are experiencing that right now in lockdown, but they can reach for a handle. They can open the door, they can walk outside, they can make a choice, they can turn left, they can turn right. They're not like they're in prison. Prison is a completely different mindset. And so the security when I go into prison is threatening, and I am aware of the dangers all the time. But the story, Larry, is bigger than me and you and other prisoners. It's about educating people about what really goes on in prisons around the world, trying to change people's perception about the individuals that they know as criminals, murderers, rapists, paedophiles, shoplifters, diamond smugglers, or robbers. You know, I want people to see that these people, these individuals, have another story. They're not just a criminal. They come from a mother, a father, they have a brother or a sister. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, how do we punish, or how do we rehabilitate these individuals? Because I don't think there's a person on earth who just wants punishment. They want to know that when someone's done wrong, especially if that's an economical wrong, for example, they steal to feed their children. And that's not me being sympathetic. I'm not arguing that people need to feel sorry for prisoners and, oh, haven't they had a hard life? And shouldn't they be treated with kid gloves? That's not my argument. My argument is very simple. When these people come out of prison, and most of them will come out of prison, do you want them to come out and be an animal where they can commit further crime or hurt other people? Or do you want them to come out and be law-abiding citizens who can contribute to society, work, pay their taxes, or even do what you and I do, you know, create a space where people can get a deep insight into the mentality of criminals? So that's why I do it, because I want to change the narrative and people's perceptions about prisons, prisoners, crime, and victims.
You know, it's amazing you are doing that, and thank you for it. And it's just so true. I tell people that all the time. Do you want a person living next to you? Because they're going to live next to somebody. Do you want them living next to you who has hope and they see a future, or somebody who's just don't give a fuck and says, you know, you're my next fucking victim? And that's what, the United States is very poor on rehabilitation, sadly. And I fight it every day. But I love what you do, because, first of all, you don't have to do it. You know, you're a journalist. You worked for the biggest I think, a media organization in Europe. Am I right? Or
The BBC, yes, for
UK.
16 years.
Yeah, the BBC. And so it's not like you're a guy that's, oh, I need a job, I'm going to go into prison, I'm going to do this. This is a guy who wants to do what you're doing. It's admirable to do what you do. And like you said, one question I know guys are thinking out here, when you go in there, do you tell them, hey, listen, I did already 12 years, guys, so I'm not a rookie. I'm not coming in here like some jerk off from the street and saying, hey, listen, I'm going to show you what it is. We're going to just kill camera. I did this for 12 years. Tell them a little bit of your story, and that should help open up a few doors. Because I know if I go to prison, I know how to talk to people, what to talk about, to let them, they'll know how I act mostly. But is that what you do?
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, when I go into a prison, I mean, sometimes it depends. I never go in championing the cause that I've been in prison for 12 years. I don't think that always does you any favours, because guys who have been in there for 20 years or guys that are doing short stints, they might look at you and think, so what? Who are you? I'm suffering it now. I'm doing it. So you don't always earn the respect just because you've done time as well. I mean, it can help. Right. No, I go in with the mentality that I have an understanding, I have an empathy, and I just think it's through the conversation, through the questions that I ask prisoners, that they quickly pick up on, this guy knows more about prison than he should do. They might see the scar on my face, they might see the way that I hold myself, the aura that I have around me, that they immediately pick up on the fact. And I wouldn't suggest that every prisoner, I only think it comes around prisoners like you and I, Larry, who have suffered in prisons, when you've been isolated, when you've been segregated, and you take on a deeper look in your eyes, you take on a deeper psychological suffering and survival mechanism. Not all prisoners go through that. Some of them sway through prison. They may have done years, but they still don't have that aura. They still don't have that presence that helped them survive, or that change of mentality. I have that. And so when I go into prison, prisoners either pick up on that. But yeah, you're right. There are occasions where sometimes the conversation or the respect that I need requires my having to share the fact that I spent time in prison. And Brazil is typical of that. When I first went into Brazil, probably one of the most dangerous places I've ever been in, and it's not protected by any guards. So I'm in this pavilion with these guys, and these guys have chopped off other prisoners' heads. And I'm not talking about people on the outside. I'm talking about they did this when they were in prison. Not only did they chop off their heads, they played football, kicked the heads around and laughed about it. So you're dealing with individuals who have no respect for life whatsoever. And I'm in a room with these guys. Not all of these guys have done this, but I'm in an environment where that's what they're capable of. And the moment I told them that I'd been to prison, I'd become one of them. They embraced me. I was a brother. When they found out that I'd been in prison for murder and robbery, I was even a bigger hierarchy prisoner. And then when I told them, and this is important, when I told them that I'd been in prison for something I didn't do, their immediate reaction was, well, why didn't you kill yourself? You can't survive in prison for that long. Why didn't you take your own life? Because being in prison for a crime you didn't commit is more painful than being in prison for a crime you did commit. But even the hardest prisoners felt that required a huge amount of respect. And so the bond was built, and that just meant that I could maneuver around that prison with some of the most dangerous prison gangs in the world, the PCC and the Red Command. It just gave me a license and a respect that they would communicate with me from that moment on. So, in answer to your question, it really is, sometimes I share that information to open doors, but most of the time, prisoners pick up on it because they know what it's like, and I know what it's like. We share the same vision. We've experienced the same bang up behind a door where you can't do nothing but just sit there, scratch your head, or tidy yourself over and over and over again.
It reminds me when I went back to prison after a halfway house, I walked into the county jail, and it's just like, you have that aura. People know, Maywood. He's just, especially I was fresh back in, 11 months. And they got it. They, like you said, they pick on it. But how did you protect? Because I know you had to think and had to put this in your mind. You got two, call them rookies, two fish that are with you. Cameramen, like you say, have no clue. They don't even know how to act. They think they got a camera, they're the boss. I mean, I've been in a lot of shoots in my life, and they do, oh, excuse me, get out of the way. Like on a street or something like that. They're moving somebody around or something like. You do that to the wrong person in prison. you're going to get stabbed right on the fucking spot. I mean, you know, I tell people, listen, I was in prisons. When your door is open, you don't fucking walk in another man's room. You fucking knock on that cell door, I mean the frame of the door, and ask to be let in that cell. Because you don't even walk down a tier and look in a cell and see somebody fucking somebody, see somebody shooting heroin, see somebody do it. Because if you do, they're going to think you're robbing them. They want to fuck their punk or whatever it is. That doesn't work. I says, you got now 2 fish or 2 kids, I guess, young guys. I'm sure you're definitely not bringing women. And now you have 2 guys with you. That, I mean, do you give them a brief? Do you say, listen, this is how it goes, watch what I'm doing,
well,
pick up on
that's
this?
exactly what happens. And I'm going to correct you. I have brought females into prisons with me because sometimes they offer a different, you know, a softer approach, and they can help me with some of the questions that mums or girlfriends or wives want to know. Things that I can't identify with, they might pick up on. So sometimes it can help me with their little whisper in my ear. But you're absolutely right. Before we go into...
But you wouldn't have brought, I got to stop you, you wouldn't have brought 2 women into that Brazilian prison.
No, we didn't have. We had one woman. Actually, we did. One of my producers was a woman with me. But she, you know, she's a professional. She's a journalist, and
you know, and we both get that. But you know, listen, I was in some maximum security prisons, and it could have got ugly, and it would have got ugly if it was. Now they had women in there, women guards. Certain things happen, but those different. I mean, outside, I've seen an instructor come in there, and it doesn't go. Look, you get the wrong guy who's not right.
Yeah, look, Larry, I'm not saying to you it wasn't easy, but look, she is capable. I'm not going to deprive a person of doing what they're capable of doing. She said no, it would have been no. She said yes, she came in and she did a fantastic job. And as I say, it helped the situation. But you're absolutely right. What happens is before I go into the prisons, I sit down with these rookie journalists who have lots of experience in other fields, and I debrief them in the same way, or brief them in the same way that you just mentioned, that I tell them that you've got to have your backs against the wall. You don't share any information, private information. When you leave the prison and you go back to a hotel, or at the end of the shoot when we leave and you go back to the hotel, you don't tell them where we're going. You don't tell them what car we got. You just don't share information. And then when we're in the prison, I'm constantly telling people that they have to respect the space of a prisoner and try to read their reactions to anything or anyone. If someone says no, take no as an answer. Don't try and push someone. I mean, let me do the pushing because I can read them better than you. Don't try and after a couple of days relax and think, actually, it's quite cool in here because it only takes a second. And a couple of my crew have suffered as a result of those seconds. As I say, attacked in Paraguay, a man was killed in a cell block right next to where we were filming, and I could see my crew were physically shaken by the experience that whilst we were filming here, 50 or 70 yards away, someone had just been killed. And when you say to the guards, what's going on? They say, oh, no one's going to tell us who did it, so we'll just take the body out of the prison. When we were in another prison in Costa Rica, one of the prisoners I was talking to, who owed somebody drugs, his mother, who came to the visit, was outside the prison and was assassinated, shot dead. The prison guard was showing us on the phone, Larry, the pictures of the poor mother's body outside the prison where she was shot and killed because her son inside the prison owed someone drugs. And that's what I use to remind the team that I'm working with, that they must never become complacent. They must never underestimate what we're dealing with here. That's not to say, trust me, that's not to say that what I'm saying is that all prisoners are bad and horrible. I'm just trying to make the point that I remind them each and every time we go into these world's toughest prisons. They're not called that for any other reason. And it's not just the physical, as you rightly mentioned, Norway. It's a place where if you're going to do time, you do it in Norway, but it's still a prison. You're still confined in the mind. And so I'm constantly reminding the team that I'm working with to be on their guard, be cautious, and don't ever relax the way you operate in this environment.
It reminds me, I remember I was in the prison system and a guy gets off the phone. And I used to tell young kids coming in, don't mess with someone when they're off that phone. You don't know what happened. Sure enough, a guy got off the phone and found out his wife killed his kids and she committed suicide. And he got on, some guy was fucking around with him. He stabbed him. I mean, he was just out of it. And there's so many, I call them stress points in prison that you don't know, whether it's visits or whether it's phone day or whether it's time or it's commissary day. There's so many things, cell, new person coming in, you know, tensions rise, people are on guard. There's so many things that us get used to, and it almost becomes second nature. But then when you take somebody who doesn't understand it, they're gone. And I watched it so many times, even rookie guards. You know, I'm gonna be, like I said, talking to some guards here soon, and it's gonna be amazing because they got that perspective, and you know, our audience will see that perspective. So now let's get back to your prisons. Okay, give me your top. How many prisons have you been in?
You mean when I was on the show? I've been to 7, 4, 2, 4, 8, 16.
You've been to 16 different prisons, all around the world, I'm assuming. And what was the worst prison?
It would be easy for me to identify one prison, but in my mind, they are all as bad as each other for different reasons. You know, whether it is because they are dangerous because your life is under threat, whether it's because they do rehabilitation, re-entry better than anyone else. That, as you know, is one of the most difficult challenges and can be one of the toughest challenges in a prison, for the prison authorities to succeed in turning someone's life around and letting them back into society where they are never going to commit another crime. That in itself is tough and requires a lot of dedication from both the prisoner and the prisoners. You know, Brazil in terms of violence, Belize in terms of the indoctrination from the authorities, Norway because of the mentality and the psychological challenges. So all the prisons, in my view, are tough for different reasons. And that's what I try to do, Larry. I try to identify the different reasons and the different challenges. So it goes way beyond punishment and rehabilitation. It goes way beyond the individuals or the serial killers that I'm interviewing. Yes, this guy is horrendous. This guy is one of the most prolific killers. This was in the Ukraine episode where I met this guy who was in a cell, a love nest with his now wife, who was much younger than him, and he killed women and children, 30, 100 women and children. And here he was with his woman in their conjugal visits. That's tough to think, is she ever going to make it out of this cell? Why would she decide to go into the prison and have a love relationship with a man who's killed nearly 100 women and kids? So for different reasons, I think the different prisons throw up different challenges. And so I would never say one prison is tougher than the other. I think some people are treated worse than others. Some people do it in a different way and it makes it harder for them. But every prison where they take away your liberty, your choice, your ability to come and go, your ability to see further than the eye will allow you to see the wall, I think is tough in my view. We can always see the sky. You will know this. When you're in a space that has a wall, you can't see beyond the wall. You have to look up. You can see the blue sky. You can't move any faster than your feet can take you. Can you imagine? And this is what I try to get people to understand. You're in a prison for 12 years. You can run and you can walk, but you can't go as fast as a car. All of a sudden you're released and then you're expected to get in a car and be normal? How can you be normal when the car's going at 30, 40 miles an hour? And you've never done that before, so you're kind of losing all sense of orientation. These are the little details that I try to get people to understand in these shows.
Well, that's, you remind me. I remember I was in Atlanta, I had 40-foot walls, 20 feet down under the ground, 40 feet above, 3 feet thick. I didn't see a vehicle, couldn't even see anything for years. And it was like, you're right. And then you don't even get it. And then you get on a bus to another prison and it's like, you're in sensory overload. I also tell people so many times, they ask, what's one of the things you miss? Obviously, every person who's been to prison for a long period of time, you ask them what they miss most. And it's not sex, it's food. It's real food. It's something. I have never asked the prisoner. I always ask them, what's their number? Like mine, 522240004. What's your number?
MP3660.
That's in you like your social security number. And I don't care how long you've been out.
I think you're one of the first people who have asked me about my number in many, many, many years. It just shows you, doesn't it?
It goes to show
and
you.
You never forget it.
And I often talk about, one of the biggest things I did when I got out was take a shower without shower shoes, bare feet. Because in the United States, these guys are in there or whatever the hell they're doing, and you don't want to walk in that crap or whatever it is. So the littlest things in the world, you think, wow, how does this affect you? But it affects you in so many different ways. So if you obviously in your shows, you don't know what prison, because I agree with you. Prison is prison is prison. I tell people when someone's telling you what to do, shut the lights out, when to get up, when to do certain, that's prison. It doesn't matter what the conditions you're gonna adjust to. That's just nature. I was in a prison it was built in 1903. It was a dungeon. And then I was in a new prison and I was treated worse. Brand new prison. You think, look at this beautiful place. But the animal guards would torture me and it was just a sick place. So, but that's besides the point. What would you say, okay, when you pick a prison, do you pick it or does the Netflix have a team that picks it? Because you got to get a lot of permissions and all this. I don't understand that. Are you the one who has final say?
I don't have final say, but I have a lot of input in what countries we go to. A lot of what we do is decided by the authorities. Who is prepared to give us access? Which countries are willing to allow me to go in and do what I do without control? Because I wouldn't sign a contract or agree to go in a prison if they wanted to control what I saw and what I did. And so it's important.
The United States.
Yeah, like the States. I haven't even really tried to get into any of the American prisons at the moment. I think maybe that's for the future, but it's been.
Well, they'll let you go into a camp.
I'm sure
they'll let you go into a camp.
That's probably why we haven't approached. But no, I have a say, but I don't have a final say. And then it really does come down to which country governments are prepared to let me go into their maximum security prison. So we've been into Germany, we've been into Romania, we've been into places here in Europe, we've also been into places in South America, we've been into places in Africa. So different countries are willing. I'm always sometimes amazed that they are prepared to allow me to expose those conditions, because some of them are so horrendous, it's dehumanizing, and I don't care what the individual has done. You can't dehumanize a person in the way that they do. We have our human rights for reasons, and I think we all deserve to be treated like a human being. The punishment is being sent to prison. So yeah, it really is about negotiation. We negotiate with countries, and the only requirement is that it's a maximum security prison, and they come in different shapes and sizes. And you said it yourself. The most dilapidated places can treat you better than the most luxury places. I'm coming from an era where when I was in prison, there was no toilet, there was no sanitation, there was nowhere you pissed and shitted. I pissed in newspaper, rolled it up and threw it out of the window, and then it was a privileged job for a prisoner to walk around the cell block picking up all the shit paper and putting it into the dustbins because he was outside of the cell block. I pissed in a bucket for many years. I didn't have a television or any of those kind of luxuries that people believe you have in prisons. That wasn't the time that I was in prison. By the time I was getting out, they'd introduced televisions, radios and things. But for most of my time, it was really about wanking and imagination. There was none of those kind of privileges, Larry. So I had it hard in my time.
And at 20 years old, that's the wanking time. Of course, I was the same way. I never been in a prison where I had TV in my cell or any of that. We had a transistor radio, AM, FM. And if you're in a prison where in the middle of nowhere, you're lucky if you got one station, whatever it was, and that was a transistor radio. They charge you so much for on a commissary list. So I think we're kind of in that same time frame. And I also look at it like, to me, see, prisons, I'm all about rehabilitation, obviously, and they all say, I've had people and officials say, you got to give up on something. I said, look at me. I was a bad guy. I laid people's arms on curbs. I did bad things, snapped them and robbed people, guns. I was a bad guy. But look at me today. I have a program that helps young people all the time. It's called Redemption. And people hit that redemption at some time of their life. I often tell people, what happens with most people is comes a time in their life when they hit a bottom and people go, well, what do you mean? I go, listen, everybody has a different bottom. One person might be driving home, have a few drinks, swerve and miss a person, go home and be shaken, and they hit a bottom, and they'll never do that again. Another person goes, he's drinking, and he gets stopped by the cops. He spends a night in the county jail, and he says, fuck this, he hit a bottom. Then you get Larry Lawton, arrested, goes to prison, still didn't hit his bottom. I hit my bottom when I was in the hole and my friend killed himself and told me he was going to kill himself, and he did it. And I'm right next to him, and that's a bottom that brings you to another point where it's now a whole different life. And I think, my goal in life is to take people to that bottom, Raphael, and go slowly without the consequences you and I felt. I mean, to take a person, people like what happened to us don't survive. Many don't, whether it's suicide, mental illness. I mean, I still have PTSD. I have dreams. There's no question things affect you in a lot of different ways, and we have to be strong to survive them. So that's my goal, is to take people like through my program. Okay, this is your choice you're making. This is what can happen. This is what can happen. This is what, without having it happen to them, hopefully. And maybe a light bulb will go off. Maybe it won't. You're really doing the same thing in this show, and that's why I've got to and it's on my playlist now to watch this show, because sometimes, to be honest, I had to turn it off, or I know what's going to happen. I know the things, and it brings back a memory. It brings back something, and I just, I have, there's certain shows, Lockup, they make it so bad. I could have been a host of Lockup, and they wouldn't let me tell the truth. That's what you were saying was so important. What you told me was great. You said, I'll only do it if they let us tell the truth, not the bullshit, not, whatever. And I respect that so much, Raphael, because that I would have did that show, but no, you can't do it. They have to have full control. They have to look at what goes out, what comes. Well, then fuck you. You're not talking about when the guard pisses on you or beats you or spits in your food or breaks a guy's legs or does whatever it is. And I'm now talking to guards who say, Larry, you're so true. Keep exposing it. These are guards. And so I love what you're doing. I don't know how you do it. I'm giving you big props, man, because you understand the system. Because, Raphael, it's I don't know if I could go in there, one, without snapping, knowing what I know now, knowing the position I'm in now, knowing everything I know now, older I am. I'm 59 years old. I'm going to be 69. I just turned 59. And I look at it a little bit different and saying, what the fuck am I going to put myself through that? Yes, listen, the money is great and everything, what you do and I do, whatever it is. But it's not even that. It's at what point am I going to put myself through torture again? And you, as an innocent man, that's what I'm saying, the respect, because that alone made me really want to do this interview, want to do more research and want to do stuff and want to help you and get this show out there to the right people. Because at this point, we need to expose what goes on around the world. And whether we watch Brazil prison as the United States and say, what are we doing? Or you watch the United States and nobody's letting them. They're very, very close. Believe and think it's not this open country. It's not. People think the United States is. It's very repressive. People have no clue what goes on in the United States prison system. And it's, you think it would change in human rights. It pisses me off when the United States complains to other countries about human rights, when they do what they do to the prisoners in the United States. It just pisses me off. And I don't give a fuck who hears that, Raphael. I don't give a fuck what government official. I don't give a fuck. Because I know I exposed the jail here, just killed a veteran. They won't release the video. Give me a fucking break. This is a veteran who fought for this country, has a PTSD attack, goes to jail, they beat him to death, next day he's dead, and they won't release the tape. Said, oh, he was combative. Get the fuck out of here, he was combative. And you got me on a roll because I love what you're doing, and I think you're exposing, and the good and bad, like you said, the Norway or the Germany. I know something about the 60 Minutes did a piece on Germany. And I know 60 Minutes very well from people who work on it and stuff like that, friends of mine. And I just love that you got the balls, man. I'm giving you a big prop. It's not just balls, because I know it's not physical. We all know I'll get my ass kicked tomorrow. We always know it's not that. There's always someone bigger. I tell everybody, there's always someone bigger, richer, bigger dick, better sex, whatever you want. You're not everything. Just be you, and you are. So I want to kind of give you an opportunity now to tell us where you're going with the show, if you have any upcoming episodes that we're going to hear about. and then give what you want to do with this and then your future?
Well, the first thing is, I think everything you say, I second. And what's important is, how do people react? That's the first question, isn't it? Here I am making a program about prisons. So all the questions you answer, the right questions. But how does the audience react? How does the general public who have never been to prison, don't have a family member who's been caught up in the criminal justice system? Why is the world fascinated with true crime and stuff? Why are they so fascinated? And that's because it's a hidden world. And what we're doing is we're trying to educate people. And I'm blown away, first and foremost, by the reaction of people. I don't get anybody come to me and sort of say, what a waste of time. Why are you doing this? Why are you going in? You should be going into education facilities or whatever. No, people from around the world. And this is the privilege of working on a platform like Netflix. I'm not just appealing to one audience, one demographic or one gender. I'm appealing to people from all over the world, of all ages, of all ethnicities, of all, kinds of characters. And they all come with the same message, Larry, that what we're doing, trying to highlight what goes on inside a prison, what's going on, is important. And they didn't realize what was really going on, what these individuals are like, what the conditions are like, what rehabilitation and punishment means when you compare the two of them. So the message is getting there. And I'm very proud of the fact that that message is reaching people and they're responding in a way I didn't expect them to. I must say, I'm surprised by the millions and millions of people that have watched this show. And I know that Netflix are so excited by the figures, because this show, in terms of prison shows, is the number one. There is no program, you had things like Tiger King, but beyond that prison, this is it in terms of the numbers from Netflix. And I know that because they've fed that back to me. So it's a no-brainer that they want more. And so there will be more. I think for me, it's time. I've reached that age where people have asked me for years about my story, my personal story, the nitty-gritty detail that I've never been prepared to share. And that's not to say because it's too dark and dirty or it's too traumatic. It's because it's private. It's the journey that I went on. I need to cope and deal with that before I share it with other people. And I also need to keep the people around me away from my life. But I've made the decision to write a book. So I'm writing a book called Notorious, which will be out later this year. Under the pandemic and the COVID, it's been difficult to do what I do best, which is make documentaries. So I launched a podcast called Second Chance. And what I'm doing is I'm talking to people about their second chance in life, whether that's somebody who's come out of prison and gone on to lead a successful career like you, or whether it's someone who was blown up in Afghanistan, survived, watched their mates and their colleagues die, but then they've gone on to lead a successful life. So it's all about second chance and where you get that second chance from. And I'm just going to keep delivering that message that I think is important, which is, don't be judgmental. Don't judge people because of what you've heard. Find out what they're really like. Talk to them. Find out what they're really like before you make a judgment. So for me, it's about doing as much as I can to get people onto my podcast to talk about their second chance, whoever they are, giving a voice to the voiceless. And it's not about campaigning or anything like that. It's just sort of saying, there's always two sides to a story. And we often only through the media, predominantly, or through politics, we only ever get to hear one side of a story when there is always another side of a story. Not that you're justifying it, it's just you've been told about something. Now it's time to listen to the person who experienced it so that you can be sure of what really went on. So yeah, my podcast and my book are my two sort of babies at the moment, if you like, and I want them to work for me.
Well, I think they're gonna. You really brought up a great thing. It took me years to write my book, and it took me over 40 years to come out with things that from being abused as a kid and stuff like that. So I think it's important that you when you're ready, you do it because you have a story to tell. And my book has reached so many people, and obviously, people interested in books and movies and all that. But it's not even that. It tells the truth because I said I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring it out. I'm going to bear the bad with the good and let the chips fall where they may. And so I think that's the good part of it. So make sure you keep at it. Let me know what help we can do for you too. And I'll come on your show if you'd like and and talk about the struggles. People think they're all great and they're all fun and it's all success. It's not. You struggle a long time to get where you're going. But I wanted to thank you, Raphael, for coming on the show. You're a great guest. You got a great story. You got a great show that you're hosting. And just to let everybody know, again, it's Inside the World's Toughest Prisons with Raphael Rowe on Netflix. Just go on Netflix and you'll see it. He's from season 2 on, and they're going on season 4, I think it is already. So, right, season 4.
Yeah.
So you got a good thing going, Raphael, and keep at it. Obviously, stay safe, stay healthy, especially during the pandemic or everything we're doing. And if we can do anything here, we're going to help you. We believe here. My platform here is about rehabilitation, about redemption. It's all about redemption, and that's what our focus is. I do the fun stuff, I do the cooking, I do everything I do, but it's really based on, hey, think about redemption. The guy you think is so bad is really not, maybe, and you don't know. Don't judge a man or you're walking a mile of his shoes, and you shouldn't judge him anyway. I don't judge people in any regard. So I'd like to thank you again, Raphael. You're a great guest. Like some parting words for the viewers.
Well, I'm pleased to have been on your show, and it's good and refreshing. People can see for themselves. 2 former prisoners who came at it from 2 different perspectives, one innocent, one guilty, went down the same road, but we're both successful. And it's not like, and I want to deliver this message to your audience, it's not like we're exploiting the predicament that we found ourselves in. We're just furthering our own lives. This is where our path has led us. This is the journey that we are on, and we have something to share with you in the same way that an entrepreneur does, a musician does, or some other successful person. They've been down an educational route maybe a lot earlier than me and Larry. So I think it's important that people don't think that we do this because it's all we can do, because there is more to us than this. It's just that what we do, we believe in, and we hope it makes a difference. So thank you, Harry, for letting me come on your show and sharing my point of view. And I hope people, when they watch the show, if they decide after listening to this that they want to watch Inside the World's Toughest Prisons or listen to my podcast, that they share their thoughts and feelings, because I think that helps dictate what we do next and how we can together bring about change. So thank you, Larry, for having me on.
You're welcome. I'm sure I'm going to have you on again after you do a few more episodes. I think we're going to, especially when you have your book and things keep going. I want to thank Raphael Rowe, who's, again, the host of Inside the World's Toughest Prisons on Netflix. Make sure you check it out. You know what I always tell everybody, listen, make good choices. Life is not about being the badass. Life is not about being the idiot that wants to go out there and be stupid. Don't go to prison like we did. Raphael didn't do it on purpose, for sure. I did. But make sure you just make good choices, man. Thanks for watching. I appreciate the YouTube family, all we're doing on Spotify and everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe. And see you next week.